The battle was over in 11 hours. 11 hours to break an empire that had ruled 400 star systems for 3 centuries. When the last Valkyrie warship either surrendered or was destroyed, the silence that followed was louder than any explosion. Of the 12,000 ships that had come to destroy Earth, fewer than 2,000 survived. Most of those had surrendered in the final hours, their crews abandoning their stations and broadcasting distress signals on open channels. The Great Crescent Formation that had conquered 11 species lay scattered across Earth's solar system in pieces, twisted metal, frozen bodies, and the slowly fading glow of dying engines drifting through the dark. Humanity had lost ships too, 412 to be exact. Every name on every ship was recorded. Every crew member was remembered. Captain Taesu made sure of that. He stood on the bridge of the Baiko and read the casualty reports one by one, feeling the weight of each name settle onto his shoulders like a stone. War was never clean. Even a victory carried the taste of ash. But the galaxy did not care about grief. The galaxy cared about power. And in the space of 11 hours, the balance of power in the known universe had shifted so violently that every species with a functioning government was scrambling to understand what had just happened. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. The Council was an old institution, a gathering of representatives from every major species, created centuries ago to maintain order and prevent wars. In practice, it had done neither. It was a place where powerful species made speeches and weaker species nodded along. The Valkyrie had dominated the Council for decades, using it as a stage to announce their conquests and demand tribute. Now, for the first time, the Valkyrie seat was empty. The Council chamber was a vast circular hall on a neutral station orbiting a dead star in the center of the galaxy. Hundreds of representatives sat in tiered rows, their forms as varied as the worlds they came from. Some were tall and thin, others short and broad. Some breathed oxygen, others breathed methane. Some had skin, others had scales or shells, or no solid form at all. When the human delegation entered, the chamber went completely silent. Captain Taesu walked at the front. He wore his dress uniform, dark blue with silver trim, his medals pinned to his chest. Behind him walked Commander Hana, Admiral Jaewon, Commander Gite, Lieutenant Suho, and Engineer Yuna. 6 humans, that was all. No show of force. They did not need one. Every representative in the chamber had watched the battle. They had seen the teeth fire from the moon. They had seen the Phantom Fleet emerge from folded space. They had seen 12,000 Valkyrie warships reduced to scrap in less than half a day. The 6 humans walking across the chamber floor were more terrifying than any army. Taesu stepped onto the central platform, a raised circle in the middle of the hall where speakers addressed the council. He stood there for a moment, looking around at the hundreds of faces staring down at him. He could see fear in many of them. He could see awe in others. And in a few, the Renari Prime Minister, the old Oshari scientist, the Pulani Elder, he could see something else. Something that looked like respect. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. 3 days ago, every species in this chamber received a message from the Valkyrie Empire, an ultimatum. Surrender Earth or watch it burn. You all received it, and you all know what you did next. He paused. The silence was absolute. You did nothing. The words hung in the air like smoke. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Renari Prime Minister lowered her eyes. The Oshari delegation stared straight ahead, expressionless. The Renari withdrew their alliance. The Oshari went silent. The Pulani, whom we saved from extinction, refused our calls. Every species that had ever called itself our friend, our partner, our ally, every single one of you, turned your backs and waited for us to die. Taesu let the silence stretch. He wanted them to feel it. We do not blame you for being afraid. The Velkhari were powerful. We understand fear. But we also understand something else. We understand what it means to stand alone. Because that is what humans do. When the universe pushes us into a corner, we do not kneel. We push back. And we push harder than anything you have ever seen. He took a slow breath. The Velkhari fleet is destroyed. Their throne world is under our watch. Their empire, which terrorized this galaxy for 300 years, is finished. We did this alone, without help, without allies, without a single hand reaching out to hold ours. He looked directly at the Renari Prime Minister. She met his eyes. There were tears on her face. We are not here to punish anyone. We are not here to threaten anyone. We are not the Velkhari. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. That is not who we are. He paused again and turned slowly, making sure every representative could see his face. But we are here to make something very clear. The old rules of this galaxy are dead. The rule that said the strongest species gets to take whatever it wants, that rule is dead. The rule that said weaker species must kneel or be destroyed, dead. The system that let the Velkhari sit in this chamber and announce their conquests while the rest of you applauded, that system ends today. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Taesu waited for it to die down. From this day forward, there is one law in this galaxy. One law that every species, every empire, every government will follow. And it is simple. He held up a single finger. You do not threaten the innocent. You do not invade the defenseless. You do not force weaker species to kneel. If you do, you will answer to us, not to this council, not to a vote, to us. The chamber was so quiet that Hana, standing behind Taesu, could hear the faint hum of the station's life support systems. Taesu lowered his hand. His voice softened, but it lost none of its weight. We did not want this. We built our weapons in secret because we hoped we would never have to use them. We hid our strength because we wanted to live in peace, not in war. But the Velkhari forced our hand. They made us show the galaxy what we are capable of. And now that the galaxy has seen it, there is no going back. He turned to look at Admiral Jaewon, who gave a single, almost invisible nod. The Velkhari throne world will not be destroyed. Their civilian population will not be harmed. Their surviving soldiers will be returned. We are not monsters. But their military will be dismantled. Their weapons programs will be shut down, and they will never again have the power to threaten anyone. He faced the council one final time. As for the rest of you, you have a choice. You can work with us to build something better. A galaxy where species cooperate instead of conquer. Where disagreements are settled with words instead of weapons. Where no one has to lie awake at night wondering if tomorrow their world will burn. He paused. Or you can test us, but I would not recommend it. He stepped down from the platform. The 6 humans walked back across the chamber floor in silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the soft echo of their footsteps on the polished floor. When they reached the exit, Ha-Na fell into step beside Taesu. That was a good speech, she said quietly. I meant every word. I know. That is what made it good. Behind them, the Galactic Council chamber erupted into noise, shouting, arguing, debating. It would take time, days, weeks, maybe months, but the old order was gone, and everyone in that room knew it. Outside the station, the human fleet waited in perfect formation. The phantom ships, the carriers, the fighters, all of them floating in the dark, their engines humming, their weapons cold, but ready. Taesu stood at the observation window of the Bekho and looked out at the stars. Beside him, Hana, Doyun, Bora, and the rest of the crew stood in silence. Somewhere out there, On a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary star, Taesu's mother was probably tending to her garden, unaware that her son had just reshaped the galaxy. She would call him next week, as she always did. She would ask if he was eating enough. She would tell him to wear warmer clothes. He smiled. The galaxy had learned a lesson today. A lesson that humanity had known since the very beginning, since the first humans stood upright on the plains of a young world and looked up at the stars with hungry eyes. Do not corner the wolves, because wolves do not just fight back. They change the entire forest. And the forest never forgets. The Valkyrie fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. 12,000 warships spread across the darkness like a wall of iron and fire. Their formation was perfect, a crescent shape, designed to surround a planet and crush it from every angle at once. They had used this formation 11 times before, against 11 different species, and it had never failed. Fleet Commander Dokkan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Gormakin, and looked at the tactical display. Earth was a small blue dot at the center of the screen. Around it, the human defense fleet was visible, a few hundred ships arranged in a loose defensive ring. Compared to the Valkyrie armada, they looked like pebbles arranged in front of an avalanche. Pathetic, Dokkan muttered. Begin the approach. Standard conquest speed. I want them to see us coming. The Valkyrie fleet moved forward, slowly, deliberately. They wanted the humans to watch. They wanted them to feel the weight of what was coming, to understand that resistance was not just useless, but foolish. On the bridge of the Baiko, Captain Taesu watched the Valkyrie fleet appear on his screen and felt his stomach tighten. Even though he knew what was coming, even though he had been briefed on the plan, seeing 12,000 warships aimed at his homeworld made something cold settle in his chest. Steady, he said, more to himself than to his crew. Hana was at the communications panel, her eyes moving between 3 different screens. Du-yun had his hands on the navigation controls, his knuckles white. Bo-Ra was running final checks on the weapon systems, even though she knew the Baiko was not meant to fire the first shot. Admiral Jaewon is on the line, Hana said. Taesu opened the channel. Admiral. Jaewon's voice was calm, almost bored. Captain, the guests have arrived. Are we ready to welcome them? All positions report ready, sir. Good. On my mark, execute Protocol 17. And Captain, sir, enjoy this. The channel closed. Taesu allowed himself one small breath. Then he turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral. Protocol 17. Hana, send the execute order to all hidden fleets. Du-yun, prepare for dimensional shift. Bo-Ra, weapons hot on my command. 3 voices answered at once. Yes, Captain. And then the galaxy changed. It happened in less than 4 seconds. The first thing the Valkyrie noticed was the moon. Earth's moon, which their scanners had classified as a dead rock with no military value, suddenly lit up with 12 points of blinding white light. The teeth fired for the first time in their existence, and the result was beyond anything even Yuna had predicted. 12 beams of concentrated energy sliced through space like the fingers of an angry god, each one striking a different section of the Valkyrie fleet. Ships did not just explode, they evaporated. The beams cut through shields, armor, and hull as if they were made of paper. In the first volley alone, over 800 Valkyrie warships ceased to exist. Dokkan grabbed the railing on his bridge as his ship shook from a near miss. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. His tactical display was a mess of error messages and damage reports. What was that? He roared. Where did that come from? The moon, Commander. The weapons are coming from the moon. That is impossible. Our scanners showed nothing on the moon. The scanners were wrong, Commander. Before Dokkan could respond, the second blow came. Space itself seemed to tear open. Across 17 different points around the Valkyrie fleet, holes appeared in the fabric of reality. Shimmering, crackling wounds in space that glowed with a deep blue light. From each hole, ships poured out. Human ships, black, angular, and fast. Commander Gitei's phantom fleet, emerging from folded space directly into the middle of the Valkyrie formation. Lieutenant Suho was in the cockpit of his fighter, the Chunnan, and he was laughing. Not because he was happy or crazy, but because the look on the Valkyrie would have been something to see. His squadron burst through a fold point barely 300 meters from a Valkyrie dreadnought and opened fire before the enemy ship could even turn its guns. The dreadnought's shields flickered and died. Suho's squadron tore through its hull with precision strikes, targeting engine cores and weapon systems. The massive ship listed sideways, smoke and fire pouring from its wounds, and then it broke apart in a silent explosion that lit up the darkness. "One down," Suho said into his comms. "A lot more to go." All around the battlefield, the same scene was repeating. Human ships were appearing from impossible directions, above, below, behind, from angles that should not have existed. The Valkyrie formation, designed to face an enemy in front of them, was being attacked from everywhere at once. Their crescent shape, which had always been their greatest weapon, became their greatest weakness. They could not turn to face an enemy that was already inside their lines. Commander Gitei led the main assault from the bridge of the Geomon. His ship moved through the chaos like a needle through cloth, weaving between Valkyrie cruisers and delivering devastating strikes to their command ships. 6 years on Mars, running simulations, studying Valkyrie tactics, learning their weaknesses. He knew exactly where to hit them. "Target their communication relays," he ordered. "Blind them. If they cannot talk to each other, they cannot coordinate." His ships obeyed. Within minutes, the Valkyrie fleet's internal communication network was in ruins. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation began to drift and scatter, unable to receive orders from the flagship. And then the carriers arrived. The massive ships from the asteroid belt, each one carrying 500 fighters, positioned themselves at the edges of the battlefield and opened their bays. Thousands of small, fast human fighters launched into space and descended on the Valkyrie fleet like a swarm. They were too small for the Valkyrie's heavy weapons to track, and too fast for their point defense systems to hit. They darted between the larger ships, targeting weak points, cutting power lines, and destroying engine arrays. Lieutenant Unbi, watching from her monitoring station, could not believe what she was seeing. The Valkyrie fleet, which had looked so unstoppable just minutes ago, was falling apart. Ships were burning. Formations were breaking. The crescent was collapsing. On the Gormakon, Dokkan was screaming orders that nobody could hear. His communication systems were down. His shields were failing. 3 of his escort ships had already been destroyed, and a human fighter had just taken out his portside engine array. "How?" he whispered, staring at his tactical display. The blue dots, human ships, were everywhere. There were thousands of them. Where had they come from? His intelligence reports had said humanity had a few hundred ships at most. This was an armada. Torak stumbled onto the bridge, bleeding from a wound on his head. "Commander, we have lost over 3,000 ships. The fleet is in full retreat on the outer ring. The inner formations are surrounded." "Retreat?" Dokkan's voice was hollow. "The Valkyrie do not retreat. Commander, if we do not retreat, we will be destroyed. All of us." Dokkan looked at the display one more time. He watched a group of human ships, those black, angular ships that move through folds in space, appear behind his rear guard and tear it apart in seconds. He watched the beams from the moon fire again, cutting another line through his fleet, like a blade through flesh. For the first time in his life, Fleet Commander Dokkan felt something he had never felt before. It took him a moment to recognize it, because he had only ever seen it in the eyes of the species he had conquered. It was fear. Far from the main battle, Commander Gite detached a special strike group led by Suho. Their mission was not part of the main fight. While the Valkyrie fleet was busy dying in Earth's solar system, Suho's group slipped through a fold point and emerged on the other side of the galaxy, directly above the Valkyrie throne world. The planet had almost no defenses. Every warship had been sent to Earth. Dokkan had been so confident in his victory that he had left his homeworld nearly unprotected. Suho looked down at the planet through his cockpit window. Cities glowed on the surface. Millions of Valkyrie civilians lived there, unaware of what was happening to their fleet. He did not fire. That was not the mission. Instead, he activated a broadcast signal that overrode every communication channel on the planet. A message appeared on every screen, in every home, in every government building, on the Valkyrie throne world. It was the same 8 words. "You have locked your fate. We are coming." And then his ships held position, weapons powered, visible to everyone below. A reminder, a promise. The Valkyrie had come to destroy Earth. Instead, they had woken something that should have been left sleeping. And now that something was standing over their home, looking down, deciding what to do next. Commander Hana stood in the communications room of the Baiko with her hands flat on the console in front of her. The room was small, barely large enough for 4 people, and the walls were lined with transmission equipment that hummed with a soft, constant vibration. 2 screens glowed in front of her, one showing the current position of the Valkyrie fleet, and the other showing a single text file that had been locked behind 7 layers of encryption for the past 90 years. She had decrypted it 2 hours ago using a key that Admiral Jaewon had sent directly to her personal terminal. When she read the contents, she did not react. She did not gasp, or widen her eyes, or sit down in shock. She simply read it, closed her eyes for 3 seconds, and then began working. The file contained a message, just one message, 8 words. It had been written 90 years ago by a committee of linguists, psychologists, and military strategists. They had spent 4 years choosing those 8 words. Every syllable had been tested for impact. Every possible translation into every known alien language had been analyzed. The goal was simple: create a sentence that would be understood by every species in the galaxy, and that would carry a meaning so heavy it could not be ignored. 8 words, that was all. Captain Taesu entered the communications room and stood behind her. He did not speak. He could see the message on the screen, and he understood what it meant. Hana turned to face him. "The transmission array is ready. I have linked our system to every relay satellite in the solar system. When I send this, it will broadcast on every known frequency: military, civilian, diplomatic, emergency. Every species with a receiver will hear it." "Including the Valkyrie," Taesu said. "Especially the Valkyrie." Taesu looked at the 8 words on the screen. He read them slowly, letting each one settle into his mind like a stone dropping into still water. "You have locked your fate. We are coming." He let out a long breath. "When do we send it?" "Now," Hana said. "The timing matters. The Valkyrie fleet is 41 hours from Earth. Their scanners will pick up the message within minutes. They will have just enough time to wonder what it means before they find out." Taesu nodded. "Do it." Hana turned back to the console. Her fingers moved with the calm precision of someone who had trained for this exact moment her entire life. She entered the final command and pressed the transmission key. For a single second, nothing happened. Then the Baiko shuddered as every antenna and relay dish on the ship fired at once, sending the signal outward in every direction at the speed of light. The message raced through space, bouncing off satellites, passing through relay stations, spreading across the galaxy like a wave in an ocean that had no shore. On the bridge of the Valkyrie command ship, Fleet Commander Dokkan was reviewing his battle plans when the message arrived. His communications officer played it for him. Dokkan listened to the 8 words in silence. Then he laughed. It was a deep, rumbling laugh that shook his massive chest. He was nearly 3 meters tall, with gray skin covered in ridges of natural armor. His eyes were small and black, like 2 pieces of polished stone set deep into his skull. He had conquered 6 species personally. He had watched worlds burn and felt nothing but satisfaction. "Humans," he said, still laughing. "They send us words, not weapons, not fleets. Words." His officers laughed with him. The sound filled the bridge like thunder. "They are trying to scare us," said his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Torak. "It is what weak species do before they die. They bark like small animals." Dokkan waved his hand dismissively. "Let them bark. In 40 hours, their planet will be ash, and their species will be a memory. Maintain course. Increase speed." The Valkyrie fleet pushed forward, their engines burning hotter as thousands of ships accelerated toward Earth. But across the galaxy, the reaction was very different. On the Renari homeworld, the message played on every public screen in every city. People stopped in the streets and looked up at the words. The Renari were a gentle species, tall, thin, with large eyes and soft voices. They had surrendered to the Valkyrie out of fear, and they had abandoned their alliance with Earth out of shame. Now, hearing those 8 words, they felt something they had not felt in a long time. They did not have a word for it in their own language. The closest translation was the human word, hope. The Renari Prime Minister stood in her office and stared at the message. Her advisor spoke carefully. "It is just words. The humans cannot possibly fight the Valkyrie. Their fleet is too small." The Prime Minister shook her head slowly. "You do not understand humans. I have studied them. They are not like us. They do not send messages like this unless they mean them." On the Oshari homeworld, the reaction was one of confusion. The Oshari were a logical species, driven by mathematics and probability. Their analysts ran calculations within minutes of receiving the message. The numbers did not make sense. Earth's known military strength was roughly 4% of the Valkyrie Empire's. No rational species would send a threat with those odds. "It is a bluff," said the chief analyst. "A desperate attempt to create hesitation." But an old Oshari scientist, who had spent 30 years working alongside human researchers, sat quietly in the back of the room. He said nothing. He simply smiled and shook his head. On the Pulani homeworld, a species that had been saved from extinction by human doctors during the Ash Plague, the message was received with tears. The Pulani had refused to help Earth, and they knew it was a betrayal. But now, hearing those 8 words, the Pulani Elder Council gathered in emergency session. "We turned our backs on them," said the eldest member. "And still they fight. What does that make us?" Nobody answered. Back on the Baiko, Hana monitored the galactic response in real time. She could see the message spreading, rippling outward through hundreds of star systems. She could track which species received it, how long they spent analyzing it, and what their initial reactions were. "The Valkyrie are not slowing down," Doyun reported from the bridge. "I did not expect them to," Hana said. "Then what was the point?" Bora asked. "If the message does not stop them, why send it?" Hana looked at her calmly. "The message was never meant to stop them. It was meant to tell them and everyone else in the galaxy that what happens next is their own doing. We gave them a warning. They chose to ignore it. Whatever comes after this, they brought it upon themselves." Bora stared at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Taesu stood at the observation window and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, hidden in the folds of space and disguised inside hollow asteroids and buried beneath the surfaces of moons, humanity's true strength was moving into position. Commander Gite's fleet was ready on Mars. The teeth on the moon were fully powered. The carrier ships in the asteroid belt had shed their rocky disguises and were forming into battle groups. And there were other things too, things that even Taisu did not fully understand. Hana had mentioned, very briefly and very quietly, something called the Fold Network, a web of dimensional tunnels that human scientists had secretly built over the past century, connecting points in space that were light years apart. If the reports were true, it meant that human ships could appear anywhere in the galaxy in an instant, striking from directions that the Valkyrie could not predict or defend against. The thought made his heart beat faster, not with fear, with something else, something fierce and ancient and deeply, unmistakably human. He turned away from the window and looked at his crew. They were scared, he could see it in their eyes, but they were also steady. They were holding. 39 hours, he said quietly. Get some rest, all of you. That is an order. Nobody moved at first. Then, one by one, they stood and walked toward the crew quarters. Hana was the last to leave. She paused at the door and looked back at Taisu. Captain, she said. Yes? The message is out there now. Every species in the galaxy has heard it. There is no taking it back. Taisu met her eyes. Good. Hana gave the smallest hint of a smile, and then she was gone. Taisu sat down in the captain's chair and closed his eyes. The ship hummed around him. The stars burned outside. And somewhere in the dark, the Valkyrie fleet was racing toward a fate they had chosen for themselves. 8 words. That was all it took to change the galaxy. You have locked your fate. We are coming. Deep inside the military command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath the city of Busan, Admiral Jaewon sat alone, in a room with no windows. The walls were made of reinforced steel, and lined with signal dampeners so thick that not even the most advanced alien scanner could detect what happened inside. A single light hung from the ceiling, casting a pale glow over a table covered with holographic maps, data pads, and a cup of cold tea he had forgotten to drink. He was 61 years old. His hair had gone white 10 years ago. His left knee ached when it rained. He had a scar on his forearm from a piece of shrapnel that had nearly killed him during the colony riots on Titan. He was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. But when the Priority Zero message from Captain Taisu arrived, something changed in his eyes. The tiredness did not leave, but something sharper rose behind it. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time. He read the message twice. Then he stood up, walked to a locked panel on the far wall, and pressed his hand against a scanner that had not been used in decades. The panel opened with a hiss. Inside was a single red switch beneath a glass cover. Jaewon lifted the cover. He did not hesitate. He flipped the switch. Within seconds, signals began traveling through cables buried deep under the ocean floor, through relay stations hidden in asteroids, through satellites disguised as space junk. The signals moved at the speed of light, reaching places that did not officially exist on any map in any government building on Earth. The first signal reached the dark side of Earth's moon. Chief Engineer Yuna was already awake when the alarm sounded. She had not slept in 2 days, not because of the Valkyrie threat, but because she had been running final checks on systems that most humans did not know existed. She stood in a massive underground chamber carved into the lunar rock, surrounded by machines so large they made her feel like an insect standing inside a cathedral. The machines were called the Teeth. Nobody knew who had given them that name. It had been passed down through generations of engineers who had maintained them in secret. Each one was a weapons platform capable of firing concentrated energy bursts powerful enough to crack a moon in half. There were 12 of them, arranged in a circle beneath the lunar surface, their barrels pointed upward through shafts that were sealed with layers of rock and metal designed to look like natural craters. They had been built 140 years ago. They had never been fired, not once, not even in testing. The engineers, who built them had calculated everything through simulations and mathematics alone, because firing even one of them would have revealed their existence to every scanner in the galaxy. Yuna placed her hand on the cold metal surface of the nearest machine. She could feel a faint vibration beneath her fingers. It was alive. After all these years, it was still alive. Her communicator buzzed. She answered it. "This is Admiral J1. Authorization confirmed. Wake them up, all of them." Yuna closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and turned to her team, 14 engineers, all of whom had spent their entire careers in this hidden place, maintaining machines they were told might never be used. "You heard the Admiral," she said. "Power sequence, full activation." One by one, the teeth began to hum. But the weapons on the moon were only the beginning. Across the solar system, in places that had been silent for decades, other things began to wake up. On the far side of Mars, hidden inside a canyon so deep that sunlight never reached the bottom, a fleet of ships sat in perfect rows beneath a camouflage net made of smart material that mimicked the planet's surface from orbit. These were not ordinary ships. They were black, angular, and built with technology that humanity had developed in complete secrecy. Their engines used a form of dimensional folding that no other species in the galaxy had ever achieved, the ability to move through layers of space that existed between normal space, arriving at their destination before light itself could make the journey. Commander Gite was in charge of this fleet. He was a quiet man with sharp features and a habit of cracking his knuckles before a fight. He had been waiting on Mars for 6 years, running drills, maintaining ships, and training his crew for a day that many had started to believe would never come. When the signal arrived, he was sitting in the cockpit of his flagship, the Geomun, reading a book about fishing. He put the book down, looked at the message, and smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had been holding his breath for 6 years and could finally let it out. "All ships," he said into the fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Gite. The signal is live. Repeat, the signal is live. Begin launch preparations. We move in 36 hours." The canyon on Mars began to glow with the light of engines warming up. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, something even stranger was happening. A series of asteroids that had been drifting through space for what appeared to be millions of years began to change shape. Their surfaces cracked and split apart, revealing smooth metal hulls beneath the rock. These were not asteroids at all. They were ships, enormous carrier ships, each one large enough to hold 500 fighters inside its belly. They had been disguised and set adrift over 80 years ago, programmed to drift in natural orbits, invisible to any scanner. Lieutenant Unbi, stationed on a nearby monitoring post, watched the asteroids transform on her screen and felt her hands tremble. She had known about them in theory. She had read the classified files. But seeing it happen was something else entirely. "Beautiful," she whispered. Back on Earth, Admiral Jawan stood in the command center and watched the reports come in from every hidden base, every secret fleet, every buried weapon. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for over a century. They had done it in the dark, in silence, with patience that would have driven any other species insane. The Valkyrie thought they knew humanity. They had studied human history. They had watched human wars. They had analyzed human weapons and tactics, and concluded that Earth was a mid-level civilization at best. Clever, but not dangerous. Not compared to the Empire that had conquered 11 species. They were wrong. The galaxy saw humans as they appeared, scattered, divided, sometimes foolish, often emotional. What the galaxy did not see was what humans did when they were truly afraid. They did not panic. They did not surrender. They built. Quietly. Patiently. In the dark. Behind closed doors. Beneath the surface of moons and inside hollow asteroids. They built things that would make an empire tremble. And now, for the first time in human history, all of those hidden things were waking up at once. Jae-won picked up his cold tea and drank it in one long sip. He set the cup down and looked at the tactical display. The Valkyrie fleet was still approaching. 59 hours remained. He opened a channel to the Baiko. "Captain Taesu," he said. "Admiral, tell Commander Hana to prepare the broadcast. She will know which one." There was a pause on the other end. Then Taesu's voice came back, steady and clear. "Understood, Admiral." He looked at the display one more time, at the thousands of red dots approaching Earth, and at the blue dots that were beginning to multiply across the screen like stars appearing at dusk. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. The wolves were gathering, and the wolves were hungry. The bridge of the starship Baiko was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that made a person feel like the universe itself was holding its breath. Captain Taesu stood near the central display, his arms crossed over his chest, his dark eyes fixed on a message that floated in blue light before him. He had read it 6 times already. Every time, the words hit him the same way, like a hammer to the ribs. The message was from the Valkyrie Empire. It was not a request. It was not an invitation. It was an ultimatum. Surrender the planet called Earth. Hand over all military technology. Disband every human fleet. Kneel before the Valkyrie High Throne, or face total and complete destruction. The deadline was 72 hours. Taesu let out a slow breath through his nose. He turned his head slightly and looked at the crew around him. Navigator Do-yoon sat at his station, his fingers frozen above the controls. Weapons Officer Bo-ra had her jaw clenched so tight the muscles in her neck were visible. And Commander Hana, his second-in-command, and the sharpest tactical mind he had ever known, stood perfectly still beside the communications panel, reading the same message on her own screen. Nobody spoke. Taesu had served in deep space for 23 years. He had seen pirates tear apart cargo ships. He had watched entire colonies burn during the border wars. He had buried friends on planets whose names he could barely remember. But this was different. This was not a battle. This was an extinction notice. The Valkyrie Empire controlled more than 400 star systems. Their war fleet numbered in the tens of thousands. Their soldiers were bred for combat from the day they were born, engineered with thicker bones, faster reflexes, and skin that could resist low-caliber energy fire. They had conquered 11 species before turning their eyes toward Earth. 11 species that had once been proud and powerful, now reduced to servants and slaves. And every single one of those species had surrendered. That was the part that burned Taesu the most. Not the threat itself, but the silence that followed it. Within hours of the Valkyrie ultimatum being broadcast across the galaxy, Earth's so-called allies began to disappear. The Renari Collective, who had signed a mutual defense pact with Earth just 2 years ago, sent a short message saying they could not get involved. The Oshari Federation, who had traded technology with humans for decades, simply went dark. No response, no explanation, just silence. One by one, every species that had ever shaken hands with humanity quietly stepped back into the shadows. Hana was the first to break the silence on the bridge. She did not raise her voice. She never did. She spoke the way a blade moved, clean and precise. "They are all gone," she said. "Every ally, every partner, every friend we thought we had." Taesu nodded. "I know. The Renari sent us a formal withdrawal. The Oshari are pretending we do not exist. Even the Polani, who owe us for saving their homeworld during the Ash Plague, have refused to take our calls." Do-yoon let out a bitter laugh from his seat. "Cowards, all of them." "No," Hana said calmly. "They are afraid. There is a difference." "Not to us," Bo-ra muttered, walked to the front of the bridge, and looked out through the wide observation window. Stars stretched out before him, cold and endless. Somewhere out there, Beyond the dark, the Valkyrie fleet was already moving. He could feel it. Like the vibration before an earthquake, there was a pressure building in the silence, and it was aimed directly at Earth. He had not been back to Earth in almost 4 years. His mother still lived in a small town near the southern coast of Korea. She grew vegetables in a tiny garden and called him once a week through a long-range relay signal. She always asked if he was eating enough. She always told him to wear warmer clothes, even though his ship had climate control. She had no idea that in 72 hours, everything she knew might be gone. How long before the Valkyrie fleet reaches firing range? Tae-soo asked. Do-yeon checked his display. At their current speed, 68 hours. Maybe less if they push their engines. And our fleet? Hana pulled up a tactical map. Red dots filled the screen. Valkyrie positions. Blue dots represented human ships. The difference was almost laughable. For every one blue dot, there were 20 red ones. We have the 3rd and 5th patrol groups in the outer ring, Hana said. The 9th is stationed near Mars, a few scout ships near the belt. That is it for what is visible. Tae-soo caught the way she said that last word, visible. He looked at her and she met his eyes without blinking. There was something behind her expression, something sharp and patient. You are thinking about the old protocols, he said quietly. Hana did not answer right away. She glanced at Bo-ra and Do-yeon, then back at Tae-soo. I am thinking that we have 72 hours, and I am thinking that the Valkyrie believe they already know everything about us. They have studied us for decades, Do-yeon said. They have studied what we showed them, Hana corrected. A silence fell over the bridge again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Not fear, not defeat, something else, something older and heavier. The kind of silence that came before a decision that could not be taken back. Tae-soo had heard stories since he was a boy. Stories that were never confirmed and never denied. Whispers about secret projects buried deep beneath Earth's surface and its moon. Programs that had been running for over 100 years. Funded by governments that no longer existed. Built by engineers whose names had been erased from every record. Weapons and ships and technologies that no alien species had ever seen, because they were never meant to be seen. Not until the day humanity had no other choice. He had always believed those stories were myths, tall tales told by old soldiers who had drunk too much and dreamed too big. But now, standing on the bridge of a ship that was outgunned and outmatched, with an empire bearing down on his homeworld, and not a single ally left in the galaxy, Tae-soo found himself hoping, no, praying, that those stories were true. He looked at Hana. Begin encrypting a channel to Earth Command. Priority 0. Tell them the allies are gone. Tell them we are alone. Hana's fingers moved across the panel without hesitation. And the message content? Tae-soo turned back toward the stars. His face was hard. His voice was steady. Tell them it is time. Hana paused for just a moment. Then she nodded once and began typing. Somewhere deep beneath Earth's moon, a light that had not been turned on in over a century flickered to life.